I recently switched to Linux, finally, and now I needed a new terminal emulator because obviously I couldn't use Windows Terminal and it's not like I wanted to. So now I'm using Kitty. This is like the next terminal that you go to after Alacritty, and the cool thing about it is that it has tabs. Not very selling, is it? Well, the thing is, turns out most terminal emulators on Linux don't have tabs, or at least most good ones. For example, Alacritty, like the #1 terminal more or less, or at least it has been for a while, it doesn't have tabs. But being used to Windows Terminal, naturally I wanted tabs. Well, Kitty has them. That's how they look, but not by default. I set them up a bit differently, but it's more or less like you see now. Aside from that, it obviously also has panes, which it confusingly calls windows. As a matter of fact, I have another quote-unquote window here, and I'm going to be calling panes windows from here on out in this video, even though it's kind of confusing. So, window is a pane in Kitty, which is strange once again. So, how does this work? You would expect this to be another tab, but it actually isn't. It's another pane/window. This is actually one of the Kitty's layouts. You can lay out your panes, windows, into multiple different ways, which is strange in other ways because usually in terminal emulators you just create a pane and then move it somewhere. This is not how it works in Kitty. There are only a few built-in layouts, and also you can create your own layouts, but for the most part they're static. You can't like change them while you're using them. You just have to switch to another layout, which has its advantages and disadvantages. But I think I like it. So currently I'm using the stack layout. I can switch to, I think, vertical or horizontal. I keep confusing them. And let's create another pane so it's more clear the difference between layouts. Here we have, I think, vertical or horizontal. Then I think that, I think tall. And this is the stack layout again, and I also have, what's it called? Grid. Grid is different because we open another window and it's here. There's another layout that I just didn't seem like wanting to include because it didn't feel particularly different. So, layouts, pretty great, isn't it? Now, you combine that with tabs, and then you can also create another OS window, which is what Kitty calls a window, and in that OS window you can also obviously create new tabs with new panes and so on and so on. Then you can set hotkeys to switch between tabs, panes, and even OS windows. You can have a hotkey in Kitty to switch to another OS window. I didn't seem like it was helpful, really, so I don't have it, but you could make it. By default, your config will appear at this path, and it's actually like a 3,000 line config that has a bunch of comments and it's honestly kind of difficult to get through, which is why I keep this default config in a different file. And then I have my own config that I actually symlink into that path. First of all, I want to point out that Kitty has a surprising level of mouse support, at least surprising for me, because I don't expect a terminal emulator that looks, well, like a terminal to support this, for example. When I first did it, I got so surprised. There is also support to make some hotkeys just send some other hotkeys or symbols and so on. So I'm used to Control Backspace deleting a word, and in a terminal, pretty much everywhere, Control W does that. So, to have this functionality, I sent whatever this is. I think I just asked ChatGPT to generate this for me, so you could do that as well. And now, when I press Control Backspace, it deletes words, and new of them as well. In terms of scrolling, it finally has a very reasonable feature that I'm surprised I haven't seen in other terminal emulators. I guess to be fair, I've only used the Windows terminal and the VS Code built-in terminal, which does has that feature, I think. So, you can scroll to the next or previous shell prompt. So I'm on this one, I press a hotkey, and I scroll there. This is very useful for when you print the help page for a command, and then it printed too much, so you want to go to the start. The way I fixed that back in the day is just creating an abbreviation that would open whatever output I'm gonna get in less, which is great, but now I just don't really need it. I don't need to remember to pipe some commands into less because I kinda have less in my terminal emulator. So aside from just jumping to the previous or next prompt, you literally have less over your terminal emulator. Let me show that. You press a certain hotkey. I'm not gonna tell you what it is because I don't know. I changed mine, and now you can literally use less on your terminal to look through it, which is much more efficient and smart than just having hotkeys to scroll, because they're very inspecific. But with something like less, you can use D and U to go half a page up or down, which is incredibly useful, and that's the reason why I've been using less so much. Now I don't really have to, because I can just scroll using my Windows terminal's less, which is incredible. And the mapping you would have to do for this is show scrollback. So I set mine to Control L because I just decided to change the Control L key binding to something else. And now I think Alt D does that. So if I press Alt D, this happens. This might be fish specific, but Control L, or rather scroll prompt to top, works a bit differently from what you would expect. If you use clear-X, this is supposed to not clear scrollback, meaning you can still scroll back to what you had before. And if you don't have that flag, it deletes that scrollback. Well, in Kitty, or at least in Fish, this doesn't really work. Clear, whether or not you use -X, will clear scrollback, but in a strange way. So here we have some scrollback, right? We can scroll back to it naturally. Let's echo high and then use clear, right? What we expect to happen is that, oh, all scrollback is now gone. That is not true. Yet echo high is not there. So when you call clear, it doesn't delete all scrollback, it only deletes scrollback that you gained after the last scroll prompt to top. So in other words, scroll prompt to top actually means save scrollback, which is a very different way to look at it, and I actually kind of like it. So whenever you want to scroll your prompt to the top, you now have a decision to make. Do you want the scrollback of your current session? Maybe you did some random ass testing and you don't actually want this. In that case, you call clear, or you can use that hotkey that you set in Kitty. That way you can actually save that scrollback to go back to it. So something that you could potentially do is, say you run help and then you immediately save scrollback, basically saying, I will need this in the future. Then you do whatever commands, call CLS, and then you can still go back to this saved scrollback. It feels weird at first, but I think it's actually the better way to do it. Aside from my terminal emulator, I also very often configure my shell, meaning that I often need to reload it. And usually how I used to do it is create a new window, then go back to the previous one, close it, and here I am. I essentially reloaded my shell. While in Kitty, I can actually combine all of that into a single mapping. So by using combine and some separator, you can actually decide which one. I just used the default one, but I think you could use something like a comma, for example. You can combine different actions. So we create a new window with CWD. I'm going to show that off in just a second. Then we go to the previous window and close that window. And as you can see, as I have already explained previously, window in Kitty means a pane. So all of these actions are done automatically on the key press of Ctrl-Alt-R. So what was that with CWD business? Let me show that off. So by default, when you try to create a new window, it opens it in your home directory. But what if you wanted a window in the current directory? You can set that, and now it opens a new window in the current directory. Same thing goes for creating a new tab or even window. Boom. So here I have all of my mappings for that, and as you can see is the name of the command, and then if you want the current working directory, you add with current working directory, and here you go. I did it with Alt plus characters, and then if I want CWD, I append Shift to it, so it's Shift Alt E, for example. I think it's very easy to remember and use, so maybe you could steal that idea. Something that I thought you couldn't do for some odd reason in Kitty, you actually can. I'm very used to using Alt plus numbers to go to different tabs, pretty much anywhere that has tabs. Well, the way you do that is use Go to Tab and then the number of the tab. Reason I'm explaining this is because it was kind of difficult to find for me, so maybe this is going to be helpful to you. Then, in a very similar way, you can do the same thing with layouts, which is exactly what I have. Control plus numbers goes me to different layouts. Now, probably the coolest feature of Kitty that really made me fall in love with it. Say you have a link on your screen and you want to open it. Well, naturally, you can just hover over it with your mouse and just click, which is already pretty great, to be honest. But I hate the mouse. Matter of fact, if I could throw it out, I would. Okay, that's kinda a lie, but if I can do something using my keyboard, I would rather do exactly that. So you can set a hotkey to open URL with hints. And when you do that, you get a hint with all the possible links that you see here. And let me actually add another link to my screen so we actually have multiple links. Now I can pick the link to go to. Say I pick the first one, and it opens it in my browser. Incredible, I think. But what if you wanted not to open a link and maybe not even a link? What if you call git status and now you're like, oh, okay, I want to add that, and maybe it's not the only file, so you can't just git add dot, you want to add that specific file. Well, you can set a hotkey to git and hints type path program dash, which is a lot, lol. Regardless, you can set a hotkey to that, and now you also get hints, but for any links or paths. Now I press 1, and that path or link or whatever else gets pasted into my command line, which is so useful. Git adding specific files has been annoying for a while. I tried to use Git UI, a Rust program, which is a Git client, for a bit, but I didn't quite like it. Something like this is much simpler and I like it a lot. And in a similar way, you can also paste links into your command line. And then if you're on Fish, you can press Ctrl X to copy the contents of your command line, go to somewhere else and paste that link, which is just, wow, incredible. And it's honestly terrible that not that many terminal emulators seem to have this feature. Unless I'm completely insane and pretty much every terminal emulator has this feature, I just don't know. Either could be true, I'm gonna be honest. I could potentially also talk about all the default features of Kitty that you probably would expect or know or have seen in a different video, but I'm not going to because, well, there are quite a few videos on the Kitty terminal already, and other people explain the simple stuff pretty well. I just wanted to show off something that I personally haven't found in videos prior, so you could have an easier time setting things up, because some things are surprisingly not as obvious as you would expect them to be. And if you enjoyed this video, press a like, type some comment, maybe you have a question or suggestion. Definitely subscribe so you don't miss my content, but most importantly, stay fresh, cheese bags, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!